Well, thank you everybody for joining me. I'm here today with Jennifer Piercey, and she is with OnTarget College Consulting. Jennifer, welcome. Thanks for
Thank-
joining me.
Thanks, Jana. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that you are in what you call your tax season
Yeah.
of of business,
Yes.
because we're right in the heart of college admissions and kind of like getting kids ready for college right now. So, I think I just kind of want to start there. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what kind of things you're dealing with right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, 2020, I'm sure you can relate to this, is the year of tossing out the normal, the normal rule book or playbook, if you will. It's certainly been an interesting year. Had to rethink many things and figure out new strategies, ideas, and also flexibility. It's really required an increased sense of ability to say, okay, this isn't working. Let's shift and do this. Let's refocus with that. And a lot of that, I am taking my cues from the students' level of stress and anxiety in particular. And also what the reality is, are their grades really tanking this semester? Is it that they can't go do the sport that they love so much that's really affecting their mental health? Maybe they're doing great with the online learning, but perhaps not being able to get out there and practice every day or go do those cross-country meets or whatever it is really affecting them. So that's definitely impacted a lot of what I normally do,
Yeah.
which is at this point in the year, we are working on finishing up all the essays and applications that students need to apply to college for starting in the fall of 2021. Or in some cases, I do have transfer students I work with sometimes as well, moving over from, Foothill to, or De Anza or wherever, to a 4-year institution to finish out their education that way. So typically I would start, freshman year is a little young. I do have some freshmen that I do work with, but it's on a very casual, no pressure basis, because as you know very well, for freshmen, it's all about figuring out what this high school thing is. Like, where's
Right.
my locker? What do you mean I have to walk all the way from this part of the campus to that part of the campus to get to class? What's happening here? And so my philosophy is, the work that I do with freshmen is really going to be more about helping you with choices that you make in terms of ways to be involved with your school or your community, things to do with your vacations if you're looking to explore a potential interest. What does that mean? Really kind of helping them understand what it means to be an engaged student and citizen.
Yeah.
Sophomore year, we can have a lot more to do. We start thinking about maybe what a good school could be. And as we know, they change tremendously from one year to the next, right? They are adolescents. They are changing every day. And so what we might say freshman year might not hold true for junior year. So typically I like to start with students, second semester, sophomore years, I think sort of the sweet spot, but I work with them at different time frames depending on when they come to me. And then really helping them choose, work on their classes, making the most of their relationships with their teachers, figuring out what classes they really love that they want to go deeper into, have more rigor, things like that. And then also, what does that mean for a future academic path in college? We explore that. We then do a whole aptitude assessment. And then that influences what we do for college search, college research, and then ultimately ending up in an application plan where we work on everything from A to Z, getting it all done, submitted, turned in, and then we deal with, hopefully, great choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do
Wow.
everything really in the whole process. I don't do test prep tutoring myself. That's one thing I don't do. But I do have lots of resources at my fingertips. And
Okay.
one of the reasons why I like starting to work with students at a bit of a younger age, that sophomore year age is really ideal, but starting as a junior is fine, is that I really get to know them
Mm-hmm.
and can really say, what you've said to me over the years, I don't think that's really going to be the best environment for you, because it
Yeah.
isn't just about getting to Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, whatever. It's really about finding out what it means to say that school is a right fit for you.
Mm-hmm. So what kinds of questions do you or activities do you have students going through as their sophomores with you? How do you get to know them and their, interests, values, what their strengths are, like what kind of environment they might flourish in? How does that work?
That's a great question. We do some surveys where we take a look at learning styles. You know, are you a visual learner? Are you an auditory learner? Are you hands-on? And what does that mean? How does that impact the way you're actually responding to different classes in the material? What kind of tips could you take for maybe optimizing how you're learning, whether it's your sweet spot or whether it's an area where you wish you were doing better? What does that mean? I find that often those things connect to many other things about the person, right? So if we know that you learn a certain way, it probably also means you'd like a particular field, right? Like if you're a hands-on student, but you know you want to be an engineer, you probably want to go to an engineering college that's based on that polytechnic philosophy, where you do have hands-on learning, where you're in a lab, you get to do research, you do group projects, right? Or you're the student that really just wants visual processing. You just want to go read the slides, read the book, take the tests, right? Big difference between the two. So by starting earlier, I get to know not just the way they express themselves, but the way they think, the way they process, and the way they reproduce their knowledge. And that connects to a lot of other things that have to do with college fit. And I find that starting earlier, and by no means does it mean you won't go to a good college if you don't start when you're a sophomore, right? It's just for the students that I do happen to start working with earlier, it means that by the time you do get to the summer before your senior year, when you really are writing those essays, like your personal statement essay or your 4UC essays, you have a much better understanding of what you want colleges to know about you, but moreover, where you want to see yourself, so that those students, by the time school starts again, first semester, senior year, they're not as panicked as the other students who are running around and going, oh my God, I need to apply to college. They're like, yeah, you know, I am too, but I've got a plan. I know what I'm doing. I know when I'm doing it, and I know why I'm doing it.
Right, right. So you don't do test prep. Do you help with college essays?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
Great.
And it's all, again, it helps to get to know the student. But I do go through a brainstorming and sort of content creation process, and lots of good stuff comes out of that, right? It's hard for a 17, 18-year-old, 16-year-old in some cases to be able to say, oh, I'm going to tell them all about me in 650 words or less, right? That seems really daunting. Like, where do I start? And so understanding sort of the purpose of that college essay, what makes sense to focus on and how to focus it, is a journey. Really, it's as much of a journey as it is finding those schools that make sense for each student. Is also understanding what you want to communicate about yourself in writing, because it's really the most important thing at the end of it. Student topics vary widely, is that your essay is authentic, and it's a much used word, that it's real and honest, but also it should be an essay that's coming from a 17-year-old, not me.
Right, right.
I'm not going to college. Mom and dad are not going to college. The English teacher is not going to college. The student's going to college. So that essay needs to really reflect who and what the students are.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point that we are not going to college with these students. And I just read a book called
Who Gets In and Why?
No, How to Raise an Adult. How to Raise an Adult. Yeah, and I loved it. And so it was written by the ex-dean of students from Stanford.
Yes,
and
I love her.
Yes,
yeah.
And I wanted to know, you bring up a really good point. And are there things that you kind of tips and guidance that you give to parents about the kinds of things that they want to ensure that their student is able to kind of do independently, and strategies that they can use to kind of learn those self-management and executive function skills that are going to help them be a successful college student, not just because they got good grades or made good decisions for college, but because once they get into that environment, they're then able to manage themselves successfully?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is a great question. I think parents this year are certainly learning what it's like to be locked in the house trying to do their jobs while watching their students go to school and trying to apply to college. And It's been really hard for some parents to let the students truly drive, in these circumstances. Again, like I said, the year of 2020 had to toss out a lot of the normal rules, but typically, yes, my main relationship is with the student. And I make that pretty clear because we're not doing the student any favors by handling the entire process for them and ensuring that when they get there, they don't really know why they're there or how they got there or what it means, right? At the end of the day, the sense of confidence comes from knowing that I did the research, I did the work, and I got into a place that I know I got into. That's really what it's about. It's not about me and what I want or the parents. It's really about where the student wants to be. And, a lot of this, we do all of the very hard work to get there, but at the end of the day, the ultimate decision's out of our hands. And so, like I said, starting the work earlier and understanding how the fit works and that we may check these 10 boxes, but in the end, there might be 5 of you that check the same 10 boxes. Someone may be chosen over you, and it's not a reflection on you. It's what the college chose to do that day. And I think it's very hard for students to understand that that's okay if they haven't really owned the process. You know what I mean? It's still hard to have a college tell you no. It's really, when people say, I don't take it personally, well, of course they would, right? They're teens, they're young adults, they're trying to figure out, their value and all of that. And I think when you don't have students fully enabled and fully engaged in their own process, it isn't going to feel like it makes sense. Does that, you know what I'm saying?
So I guess I'm hearing you say that your process with these students is student driven, and you let the family know that the decisions that you're making alongside is alongside the student and what they're saying that they want, and they're engaged, they're interested in this process, and they're choosing things that are right by them, not necessarily what a parent might have. Like, parents have, hopes and dreams for their children, and it may not end up being, consistent with what their child ends up choosing.
That's right.
Yeah. But, and what about, just making sure that when they do go off to college, that they are going to be able to manage themselves in that setting independently?
Yes, right. You that's good. We'll go back to that. I realized I didn't really answer that.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with the reasons why a student is choosing a particular college, but also making sure that they've done, the writing, closing the loop on everything. They understand that they've had to step up and into the game. Now, there are some students for whom executive functioning is more of a challenge. Perhaps they have a learning difference where they really know a true set of accommodations will be the key to their success in college. In that case, my process is a little bit different. Maybe the list is smaller. We have specific colleges on that list for very definite reasons. And I might structure it a little bit differently so that when they get there, they understand that they're going to a place where they can succeed and they have the tools right nearby if they need them to succeed. Mm-hmm. Right? Because there are some schools that will say, yes, we have an Office of Disability Services. Well, you know what that means. It means it's a little room or a series of rooms somewhere. It might be in the basement of a building. And what it means is if you have a documented disability, you can go and you can get, make sure you have that front row access if you're physically handicapped. If you have a learning disability, what does it mean? It means maybe you get extra time. But oftentimes in schools that really don't have strongly structured support, your extra time consists of you staying in the same lecture hall and finishing your test while the other lecture after it starts. Yeah. That's not necessarily going to lead to success.
Right.
And there has to be multiple discussions along the way of like, well, how have you succeeded in high school? What accommodations have you used that have helped you get from where you started to where you are now? Mm-hmm. Don't you think that those are key to your learning? And why wouldn't you give yourself that benefit when you go to college? And there'll be a lot of students. One of the things I like to tell students is, trust me, more students will take advantage of tutoring and writing centers than you'll ever know, because a lot of students won't admit it, but you will not be the only one by any stretch. And so, it's okay to embrace that.
Yeah, it's a really important point because college is very different from high school,
Very.
and kids have to, and young adults have to learn really to advocate for themselves and what they need.
Yes.
And they need to learn that while they are in high school, you know,
Yep.
and their their parents will do them a service if they empower them to ask for what they need when they need it, you know, and teach them and work with them to ask for those accommodations and to know their strengths and limitations, and to be able to um, uh, shift accordingly themselves, you know, rather than having other people do it for them, you know, because there is no individualized education plan in college. It is self-driven accommodations that students need to advocate for themselves.
That's totally right. And as you stated, you know, once you turn 18 and you're off to college, the ADA does not require your college to do anything for you other than ensuring that you have a ramp to get into, you know, the
Right.
basic ADA compliance is really all they have to do. And so one of the things that I work really hard on is getting the parent to step out of those, hey, so and so needs a meeting with you.
Right.
You know, I will respond, great, have him or her reach out to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I see the student. I start like that. And then sometimes I've had to say, okay, that's enough. You have to back out. But I'm a parent of a student with learning differences. So I get it. Most of us have fought like crazy to get our students anything and everything we possibly can, because let's face it, as a parent, it's heartbreaking to watch your child suffer. It's
Yeah.
awful. And you get very used to being that person that, as you said, makes things happen, facilitates things, gets the connections, that little fine point to touch. And it's really hard to back off of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so hopefully part of the process that we would do with a student that has LD, executive functioning, even, you know, high functioning autism, will be more of like, that's great. I appreciate you letting me know. I'm going to talk about it with him or her. You know, we'll go over it together. It's just a lot of that messaging. There are occasionally students who really clearly, you know, I haven't been sure that they've really been ready to go for this. And so we have some discussions
Yeah. Yeah.
about what that means. But really, when students can figure out what it means for them to kind of to really own it, the outcome can be great. That student might end up at a college that no one's ever heard of, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's still college, and it's still college full of people that get it, that
Yeah.
understand that, hey, these students are often, as you know, incredibly smart. They just reproduce their knowledge in a different manner.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get that student to a college where the administrators, the faculty, the resident advisors, everybody gets it, wow, imagine what you could do when you don't have to explain yourself,
Yeah.
you know?
And on that note, how do you, as a college counselor, how do you do your research? How do you know so much about the different colleges? Like, how does that work?
Great question. It's a continual process. And I will say that there are many incredible people who do the same thing that I do. And when I feel that I know I'm not the right person for a particular student, I am happy to refer the family to someone else that I know really has a particular specialty. You know, by no means would I say I'm the right person for every and any student, because that isn't the case. You know, there's some who specialize in visual and performing arts because they themselves went to that were dancers of Joffrey Ballet, or they went to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. And so they might have a different understanding, or they themselves are have their master's in education focusing on students with autism. So those people, you bet, if I feel like I'm not the right person, happy to refer, because at the end of the day, it's all about the right thing happening for the family. So people that do what I do, there are a couple professional associations, and that's one of the most important things, is to join at least one of those associations, because Membership requires you to have a specialized certificate in college counseling, which is a graduate program. Some are done online, some have sort of a hybrid style, which they did before COVID. Others will have masters, will have PhDs, we've got doctors, et cetera. And so you want to join one of those, you want to participate in all networking events. We have conferences that I go to. In a normal year, would visit at least 20 colleges or universities every year, and walk all over that campus and talk to as many people as we possibly can. I take photos, I write up notes, and where I don't know about a college, I've got an amazing network of people at my fingertips that I can reach out to and find out what I need to know. And it's a continual thing. It's just like, think of continual education hours that many practitioners have to go through. So do we.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. And what have you noticed this year with the big changes with COVID and everything? Like, what kind of guidance have you had for families? What have you learned from the schools? What are things that are being done differently that families should know about right now?
Right. Good question, because it's very likely that some of these will carry over to the process for our current juniors. I mean, we honestly, one of the biggest things obviously out there is standardized testing.
Mm-hmm.
That has gone through a tremendous upheaval this year for good reason. And as we know, in the state of California, standardized testing really hasn't been possible very much at all, except for a few very select areas. California has the largest test-taking population in the country. And when high school students in California can't take the SAT or the ACT, it has a pretty big impact on colleges and universities all around the country. But we're not the only state that's had the same problem, right? A lot of the other populous states in the country have had a similar challenge. And so some colleges responded earlier and others took a while to get there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we ended up with over 1,600, so 1,600 four-year institutions that are test optional right now.
Wow.
Now, some of those are permanently that way. Others did it this year out of recognition that it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Others said, hey, we've been curious about it. We're going to start a pilot project starting with this year. So that's been a major development, which has been really encouraging.
Yeah.
The data won't be available yet to let those colleges that were reluctant to go test optional. The data won't be available for a little while for them to understand what kind of quality applicant they got. We do know a couple things. First of all, the number of students applying without scores obviously is way, way up, which is great. We also know that it has increased a more diverse range of applicants to many colleges. That was another big point of contention this year, was this is about diversity and access. It's not about just being able to test, it's about who gets to be able to test. But we also know that the process is often controlled by people that are not admissions counselors. They're not running the Office of Admissions in some cases. There's one state in particular that I'm thinking of, the Board of Governors. It's a very political decision. They have refused to go test optional for all of their public universities and colleges. And as a result, their applications have dropped already by 50%.
Wow.
For an entire public higher education system. That's a big hit.
Yeah.
But they're not changing. So it's got some interesting ramifications. The other thing is students, it's been sort of a push me, pull you thing. A lot of students started applying later than they normally had. By mid-October, almost half of students surveyed in a survey done by niche.com had reported they hadn't started really applying to college because they just didn't understand, can I test? Where should I be going? Can I even go? Can I afford it now?
Right.
And then other colleges have seen an increase in early applications because I think the heightened level of anxiety and stress has caused students to want to just get more out there, get some things earlier so that they can feel like, okay, I am doing something. Yeah. So that's been different. Another one of the most significant things that's changed this year is the engagement process. How do students engage with the college? How does the college then engage with a school, with a student, when it's all done in a virtual setting? Yeah. Now, some colleges have offered very limited access to personalized visits where it's just you and your family, one at a time. But for the most part, they they all recognized they needed to do virtual offerings. But honestly, probably by about that time that survey was put out, students all started getting Zoom burnout.
Right.
Right. And it's really hard to personalize engagement when you're having to make sort of a one size fits all to be put up on the web,
Yeah.
to allow people to access it at any time. And so students have really felt strained in terms of being able to say, I know I like this school for sure, because I've been there. I talked to people there. I saw what it was like. Well, they haven't. And so it's been very hard for them to understand the whole entire spectrum of a fit.
Yeah. So have you noticed that many families, or more families than typical, are opting for a gap year?
Right. That was one of the myths that we thought could come true this year, but in fact, that is not the case.
Hmm.
Yes, college enrollment overall in the United States for the fall was down. I think it was 4.4% overall, which actually is nowhere near as large as you would have imagined it could be. The biggest drop in enrollment has been in community college, unfortunately.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, where there were some anticipated big bumps in it that didn't necessarily come true. On the community college level, perhaps it's affordability, the life realities of whether a parent or someone has lost a job, a home, to COVID, or the economic impact of COVID made it hard to take that next step. There have been some schools that have definitely seen a bump in gap year requests and then granted them. Those were schools that had the ability to say, sure, go ahead, no problem. But overall, no, there hasn't been a massive national surge of gap year because what would have been available?
Right. And for our families, I can imagine that on the one hand, you would think, well, I don't want to pay for college if it's all going to be online, or
Right.
I don't want to attend college if it's all going to be online. But on the other hand, you might have the opportunity to get into a college that you might not have thought that you would have been able to get into had things been going the way that they had been going previously. So you might have more of an opportunity to get in. In addition, I think, that what I heard on another podcast recently, and tell me if this is true, but there's a lot of people who would be coming to college from abroad
Yeah.
aren't coming to the colleges. So there's more space for students in the United States to go to college in the United States.
That may be true, and we don't know that yet. This application season will be the first real proof of it. We do know that applications from international students are way, way, way down. We do know that as a fact. It plummeted. Of course, they can't get visas, right?
Yeah.
And we can't send our students to study abroad. So why would they be coming here to start their education? So we do know that that's a real thing. At the end of the day, how many more spaces will it free up for domestic students? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly it could have added some flexibility. And there are a couple different factors that will also be impacting students. Another is that many students are now saying they only want to go to college within a certain geographic radius, right? From their home, wanting to go about 2 hours from home. Whereas maybe in the past, they would have said, sure, I'll go to Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, or yes, going all the way back east, New York, yay, but New York's a hot spot. Are you going to go there? So that's been a shift. So, and then also maybe a shift in terms of how many schools students want to apply to. In some cases, some schools are saying, no, we're getting more. Other high schools are seeing less. So those are all going to kind of come into the mix to see what happens. I have participated in hundreds, probably at this point, I stopped counting, of presentations with various officers of it, from college admissions roles, where they've talked about whether or not they think the gap year will really have an impact on the admission levels for current applicants and applicants for next year. And they don't really think so, because at the end of the day, even if you granted gap years, you still have numbers that are missing from this classes above. So at the end of the day, their budgets need to make sense too. And so it is possible that we'll see greater admission numbers from schools trying to offset that. You mentioned maybe getting into some schools they might not have. In other words, that's really often a factor of the wait list, right? Where students are waitlisted, but colleges went to waitlist much earlier last spring than they normally do. We may see more of that this year. We may see more colleges taking in a slightly higher number of students to try to offset the unpredictability of what we're going to see that maybe we haven't quite come out yet. So I'm not worried about it being a ton harder to get into. Some schools make it a little bit harder to get into. The exception could be the big public universities in certain states. For example, California, right? We have some of the best public universities in the country, right? We also have the largest public university system in the country, which is the California State University system. It's the biggest one. They were very clear. They went virtual right away. They were the first university system to announce they would be virtual for fall. They announced very early they were going to also be virtual for spring. That's enabled them to plan better and their students to plan better. And it probably means that more California students are going to say, okay, let's do more applications to California publics because they're test blind, very important difference. So let's go ahead and increase our applications to those schools. So it's quite possible, don't know. I wish I had a magic ball, I don't, but it's quite possible that we'll see increased application numbers for the public colleges and universities.
Yeah. So just for the listeners, in case there is any confusion about a gap year means you do apply to the college, but then you request, if once you get accepted, you request a pause.
Yes, that is the more typical process for doing that, because you have gone through all the hard work as a high school when you've got your school counselors behind you, your teachers, you've got a whole system behind you getting you to that point. And then depending on the college that you decide you want to accept, you then have to ask, it's basically asking permission to start a year later. And it is up to that college's discretion as to whether or not they grant you that request. And so you can't just say, I want to do a gap year, because they'll ask you, well, what are you going to do? And if you say, I don't know, you know.
Right.
Right. So you can't assume that you can go off and take community college courses for a year and that your college will let you.
What if, so what would be the difference and what would be the process for somebody who was like, well, I'm not going to go to college right away. I want to go out into the workforce and work for a little while. And maybe they work for a year. And then can they then apply to a 4-year university?
Absolutely. Yes, for sure.
Should a student who wants to do something like that obtain letters of recommendation from their high school before they leave in preparation for the process that they might go through in the future?
It would certainly be wise, because as we know, our teachers do many more things than just teach in a class, right? One of the things that our teachers, who are already very strained and stressed, one of the things that they do is they write letters of recommendation. They only have so much bandwidth for that.
Right.
And they're getting to know a constant flow of students that turns over every year. So for those letters of recommendation to really have impact, you want them to read as if the teacher really knows you, not just as a student sitting in that class, but as a person with character who contributes. And the farther away that year was from when the teacher's writing the letter, of course, the harder it would be. Think about if we were trying to do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then on so then there are students who choose to go the community college route, who can then either be on kind of a pathway through, career technical education, or they can be preparing for a transfer. And just say a little bit, because I know we're short on time, but say a little bit about how you help to support students who are considering a transfer to a 4-year university and where you kind of come into that picture.
Sure. So first of all, we're so lucky. We have amazing community colleges in our area, aren't we?
Yeah,
we're so fortunate.
Absolutely.
And they have amazing transfer counselors that help students plan out their curriculums so that they understand the classes they need to take in order to be able to transfer. Now, the public colleges and universities in the state of California, very, very few of them will let you come in as a lower division student. They really are only interested in you transferring in as a junior.
Right.
So if your plan is to transfer and you want to go to a UC or a Cal State, you are best advised to assume that it's a 2-year process where you'll be at the community college and you're applying to transfer that second year that you're at the community college in order to year 3 jump into the 4-year institution.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to start that process just taking this class here and that class there. You have to have very definite goal. I'm going to get from here to here, and I need to understand the steps I have to take to get to that goal. You know, the certain class choices you have to make, the extra effort you may have to go to get to know your teachers, because you still need letters of recommendation.
Right.
And some colleges and universities will take you as a 1-year transfer, but again, you got to be firing on all cylinders, knocking everything out of the ballpark. So, but it is absolutely a valid and worthy journey. Depends on the student, depends on the family choices that have to be made, whatever. Totally okay to do it that way. Now there's some, I wanted to point out one more thing. Not all colleges allow you to take a gap year. For example, the University of California system, nope.
Huh.
Unless you have an exceptional case, right? If you have to go serve in the military, if you've had a sudden traumatic loss, major life event, yes, of course, they're humans too. They could grant you an exception. But for the most part, the public universities and colleges, you'll be starting all over again. The good news is for the UCs and Cal States is that typically you do not need letters of recommendation unless they reach out to you and ask for them. So you would have to apply all over again if that was your ultimate goal.
Okay, so they don't ask for letters of recommendation, just period, or in certain circumstances?
It is not part of their application process, but some of the UC campuses will occasionally reach out and say, we would like to see a letter of rec, you know, and
Okay.
for particular majors, but that is not a standard part of their admissions process.
Okay, good to know. Well, gosh, I feel like I could just talk to you forever and ever and ever, but I know we need to wrap this up. So so are you accepting anyone now, or are you accepting starting in the spring for new clients? And how do people contact you?
Sure. So I have a website, which is very long. I'm sorry, but it's, www.ontargetcollegeconsulting.com. And I have my phone numbers there. I have a form that people can fill out to request. I do offer a free initial consultation. I like to do an initial phone call with parents just to kind of see more, or learn more about their student, what they're looking for, past experience if they have older children. And currently I am not able to take any juniors. My class is full. It's been full for a while. But sophomores, yeah, happy to talk to sophomore, freshman families and get started probably since we're now in December. How did that happen?
I don't even know. I don't even know.
So probably start talking to the younger students, after the first of the year. But I do already have some sophomores that I'm working with. So yeah.
Well, Jennifer, it was really great talking to you, and I'm looking forward. I hope that you'll come back, because I'd love to have a conversation after we see kind of what happens with the admissions process for this school year, and on the other side of COVID potentially, we'll see what happens. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. This was really fun. I look forward to talking to you again.